Welcome back to the Discovering Commercial Real Estate podcast. We have the man himself, Abe Betesh, here with us today. Abe, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So let's get straight into it. My first question to you, Abe, is how did AB Betesh become AB Betesh? Tell us your origin story.
Wow. Uh, I don't know how far we want to go back, but when I was born in Bradley Beach, New Jersey, I went to, I grew up in a poor home, but a loving home. I had the privilege of inheriting my parents' work ethic. They worked together very hard in a retail store. Uh, they put me in school, and I was struggling my whole life in school. I wasn't really made out to be a good student, but I think the values and the work ethic that they taught me, watching them, I worked with them in their store. My parents worked together in a retail store in Queens,
Mm,
and I worked there. And I think I had some ambition, even though I wasn't doing great in school. And in high school, I knew I wasn't going to college. A lot of my friends were going to college. I had a good time in high school. I think my whole goal to in school was just to have a good time.
mm,
And around junior senior year, I realized that the party's over.
mm.
Wasn't going to college, and I decided to go take a salesperson's license. I think in the beginning of senior year,
Mm.
went to Brooklyn College. I think I was 16 or 17 years old. I don't even know if you're allowed to do that anymore. And that's really where my connection to real estate began.
And so, what do you think you'd be doing career wise today if you never got into real estate at the age of 16, 17, 18?
Wow. I mean, my whole life has been in real estate, but I mean, I know as a young kid, I wanted to be an actor.
Uh-huh.
And many times in the first decade of my career, I said, whatever I have, let me sell. And I don't know, maybe I saw that movie. I saw that movie when he was a sports agent. I always wanted to be a sports agent. I think
Uh-huh.
if I could go back in time, I think that would be my second career,
Okay.
a sports agent. Maybe it was show me the money, got me all excited. I loved it.
Right, right, 100%. And what would you say is kind of like your secret sauce that makes you so successful in the real estate business? Is it your sales skills, your attention to detail?
So I think if you want to call it a secret sauce, you have to also call it uh, a curse
Mm,
because my attention to detail is definitely there. It's also a combination of OCD, attention to detail. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time. I think
mm,
anybody in my end, my business, and anything or detail oriented as far as development, real estate, so forth, so on. I think your attention to detail is the key,
mm,
and sometimes could be a haunting feature to carry along with you. But
mm.
it's certainly a blessing and a curse at the same time.
When it comes to the New York City real estate business, what do you think excites you most about it?
I think I'm doing this for about 37 years, and I think that the more complex the issues, I think the more creative a deal is. Um, it definitely, as you're in it longer and longer, it becomes less and less exciting. You have to find different ways for it to excite you. When I was 21 years old and I owned a building, I used to love driving by the building, and I felt a certain attachment. Now there's so much going on, and there's so many deals going on. You do lose that call it
Allure
love
for
and
the
excitement
mm,
that you had, and it just becomes sometimes. I think the challenge is that it doesn't just become a number on a paper in another deal. I think you have to, we try to throw some fun things into our developments
mm.
as we go along, anything to excite us.
Okay, very interesting. Okay. And when you were a broker, can you tell us if you remember your first ever deal that you closed?
Of course I do. I remember the address. I have the commission check in my office because that deal could have made or break me. I started off in a office when I was in Brooklyn College. There were different real estate brokers that were coming to pitch.
Mm,
Of course, as a young 17-year-old, I thought I was special that they were going to hire me. Obviously, we know now that it's commission based only, and
mm, mm.
they'll hire anybody.
Yeah.
So I went to work in an office, 32 Court Street, I think in 1987 or 1988, and I was working there for about 6, 7, 8 months canvassing, doing everything the broker told me to do. A couple of deals fell through. It was
Mm,
very discouraging. I even remember I felt so bad I wasn't making any money. I remember at night I would go to this. I'd go home. Then like at 10, 11 o'clock, I'd go. to Times Square where they had a telemarketing. I'd be like with 1,000 people trying to sell
Wow.
things to people on the West Coast,
Wow.
and it was getting to the point of no return. And there was a deal at 55 West 180th Street. I'll never forget the address. It was an apartment building, and the deal was about to happen, and then it broke up, and I really didn't think I was going to last.
Mm,
And all of a sudden, in the middle of the day, the broker said that the deal's back together, and we're running to a contract. In those
mm,
days, there was no email. So when you want to sign a contract, you go to an office building, the lawyers sit down, everyone sits down, and you negotiate the contract. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was
mm.
probably the greatest day of my life, career wise. And That's how it all started.
Let's say there's a young broker out there right now watching this, who gets very excited about deals. How would you say they can manage expectations and kind of not get their hopes up for a deal, whether it may not even close?
I think they have to have confidence in themselves. I
Mm,
think they have to realize that everyone has a story that they almost gave up.
mm.
I think you got to get through that first deal one way or the other. I don't care if it's a year, 2 years, 3 years. If you have confidence in yourself, hang in there. You'll find out that the first deal is the hardest deal. And if I remember that address 36 years later, um, it's something worth fighting for. Get
Right.
that first deal in, and then you could quit after that if you don't like it. But don't quit because you didn't make that first deal.
And you did a lot of deals on 100th Street and East Harlem. Can you tell us, please, why you think you excelled in these types of areas?
So when I was a salesperson under the broker, I fell into a group of investors that were all part of the same, call it, uh, family of apartment building buyers. I
Mm,
think they were all related. One of them was Howard Parnes. You ever hear of Houlihan Parnes? He was a client of mine, and he had a couple of other of his friends, and they literally touched buildings in the Bronx and Harlem two, three times in their lifetime. And I just happened to have been servicing them at the time. And at those days, it was more about finding the product. In those days, the product was two and three times the rent roll. If you found something at three times the rent roll, you'd call these groups up. You'd get them all excited. They'd start competing with each other, and you would most probably walk away with a deal.
okay, interesting.
They taught me a lot about real estate. There were no banks back then, so every deal was purchase money mortgages,
Mm,
and they would buy the deal with let's say 75,000 cash or 100,000 cash, and they would put it back on the market a day after they signed the contract for less cash, but a lot more purchase
mm.
price. And I really learned the creative way to buy real estate from the group of those investors.
You were making all these calls, canvassing properties. What were you saying to people as a young agent to kind of set yourself apart?
I think I just had that ambition and that
Persistence.
hunger to keep going, keep making the calls. One thing that I remember that I learned from that experience was I was in an office with people a lot older than me, and they were all sitting at their desk, but they had a lot of distractions. I remember one was having marital issues. I was right there. I mean, the cubicles were literally 2 feet from each other. Everyone was like in one room. And I realized back then that when you go to work, you need to go to work. You
Mm,
need to try to separate your what's going on with you at home. And when you get in that office or you get in your car to go to the office,
mm,
focus on work. Then obviously it's nice to focus on your family life when you get home and balance it that way. Many people in that office had other things going on. And the fact that they weren't making a weekly salary, I think brought more pressure on them. And I think I just had nothing in my life, but I just wanted to make deals. Any successful person will tell you that there was a bit of obsession that went along with their personality at the time you're building a company or setting yourself up. You need to be obsessed, you need to be neurotic,
mm.
you need to have all of these traits in order to come out on top.
And do you think these traits can be learned or are they hereditary?
I think they could be learned. I think if somebody has ambition, and I think if somebody's serious
Mm.
about spending time on their career and maybe sacrificing a little bit for their career, I think they can learn everything else after that.
Amazing. Okay, great. And you got a letter from Trump back in 1988 saying that he's keeping an eye on you. How did this come about, and how do you think this affected you moving forward?
Well, first thing that happened was is I think maybe a year or two into my brokerage career, the New York Times reached out to me, and they wanted to know when I took the salesperson's license and how did I get it done so soon. And and how I was making deals at such a
Mm,
young age. And they then realized that I might have been the youngest salesperson in the history of New York City at the time. And that's how the article started. And when I spent time with the editor of the Times,
mm,
he asked me what books do I read and how do I get motivated to do what I do. At the time, I think I read The Art of the Deal by
right.
Donald Trump. So he named the article Trump Admirer, so forth and so on.
What do you think was your biggest takeaway from that book that kind of you hold as a principle to this day?
I think that reading that book um, gave me the inspiration to kind of jump up a couple of steps in your thinking,
Mm,
uh, uh, as well as a lot of the things that a lot of things that Donald Trump did at a very young age was he used the political system to basically reinvest in New York, got a lot of tax abatements,
mm.
which every developer right now is working on tax abatements in the form of a 421A and so forth. And I just think that he creatively um, built up, built up his empire with bank financing and political tax breaks. I think that just it was just it was just a basic creative aspect to putting together a real estate deal.
What's the most challenging deal that you ever had to work on? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, they seem like they're all challenging, especially these days in the current environment. But I would tell you that um, there was a deal on Fourth Avenue, which I basically found a large lot that I was going to make a residential condominium development. And I had a few associates that we were going to do it together.
Mm.
And again, it was just word of mouth, we're partners, we're partners. And the entire real estate market collapsed. I don't exactly know when this was, but literally overnight, everything changed. Surely, by surely, the partners backed out of the deal. I had a very large deposit down and I had no place to go, no bank, no partner, a lot of money. I don't think I could have afforded to lose that deposit. And I just said to myself, what else could be at this site? Found out that the school system, school construction authority, was looking in that neighborhood. It was a present church and it was a joint venture with the church. The pastor and I were working the deal out together, and we both agreed that instead of developing condos, let's just sell it to school construction authority. They would keep the back portion of the property
Mm,
for their church,
mm.
and everything else would be a school. And after that miraculous change of plans, it didn't stop. It created more challenges because while we were excavating, we found out that in like the 1800s, it was a burial plot.
Oh, wow.
So I'm literally at my desk and I'm getting calls from Channel 4, Channel 2. What are you going to do about the bodies, the
Oh,
crypts?
no.
Like, what's a crypt? And thank God the church worked it out respectfully. We got through that deal. School Construction Authority didn't want to have anything to do with it. We worked it out. We got through and we closed, and it's a thriving educational facility. Right now at this
Amazing.
point. So the deal worked out. A lot of, a lot of joy in real estate is that you're creating uh, benefits to a community that I always say, let's respect this building because this building is going to outlive all of us put together. And I think that's really the understanding of development is that you're building something that's going to be there a lot longer than you.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And it sounds like you have a lot of crazy stories. Are we ever going to see a book written by AB Betesh?
I don't think the book is going to be about how to succeed in real estate. I think the book is going to be uh, a comedy because I'm not the only one, but we have so many crazy, wild stories that go on day in and day out. I mean, the things that people couldn't even comprehend. I'll tell you a funny story. So I was going out with my wife. I think I was 22 years old, and again, I wasn't established. I just had desire and heart and ambition. And my father-in-law, may he rest in peace, he sat me down, a very serious man, and he's asking me questions. And I know that what he really wants to know is, am I going to be able to take care of his daughter?
Right.
I mean, every father wants to know
Rightfully so.
if
Yeah.
their daughter's going to be taken care of. So I'm sitting there and he's asking me questions, and we start talking real estate. And he starts to tell me about this building on Church Avenue where he owns with this prestigious family, and he's a silent investor. And he's explaining it to me. And there's a gym, and he's telling me basically he's defining the building. And I'm starting to realize that a bank took over a building in foreclosure, and it's just very similar. So now I'm asking him questions. Does
Right.
this building have this? Is there a closed store here? Yeah. And I'm realizing it's exactly the same building. But now I have to basically tell him that he doesn't own that building
Mhm.
anymore. So I finally had to break the ice and tell him that I think he lost the building to
Wow.
foreclosure. Bank is marketing it, and his investor who brought him into the deal does not own it anymore.
Wow.
And I heard that he went down to his file cabinet in the basement and spent like 2 days there, you know, in disbelief.
Oh
So
my god.
I kind of burst his bubble a little bit, and it's a family story that we tell. It's going to be a story that goes on for generations.
Generations. Got it.
But
Got it. Okay. Great. Um, and what do you think is the secret to effective negotiation?
it's simple. If you're negotiating to beat the person, embarrass the person on the other end, always feel you have to come out ahead, that might work for a deal or two, but that's not gonna reap extended
Mm,
benefits. That's not gonna create long-lasting relationships. I've made more money on secondary deals with a seller or a tenant that I was on opposite ends
mm,
than I have of, call it, a first-time relationship. I think everyone needs to realize when they're sitting across from a person that that deal is going to happen. Find out what the person wants. Try to give them what they want in a way where you still prosper, but care about the person.
mm,
Let them care about you. I've been involved when I've been in contract on certain properties, markets change, cycles change, they change overnight. And I've gone to sellers many times and extended closing dates that were time of the essence. Time of the essence means they could keep your deposit and they could sell it to somebody else. And I think the fact that I care, I try very much to genuinely care. I genuinely care for every person that I deal
mm,
with.
mm.
And it comes across that they genuinely care as well. And again, remember I said prior, try to deal with nice people because you never know when you're going to need them. So I think when you're negotiating, it's not about killing and beating the
Mm,
person
mm,
and coming out and telling your friends you beat the crap out of him. No, no, no. It's about understanding what that person wants. Take a piece of paper out, ask him what he wants to fulfill in the transaction,
got it.
try to work it out, and you'll both be happy. And that bond of buyer seller or landlord tenant will outlast that particular transaction. And you could do multiple deals from the relationship. Real estate is
Mm,
relationships.
mm.
It's location, location, location. It's really location, relationship, relationship, relationship.
Got it. So it's important to kind of take that short term focus and throw it out the window and kind of focus on the long term and building that relationship
You
for
want to beat the
lifetime.
guy up, you want to embarrass him, find out what happens when you embarrass another person.
Mm, mm,
You're not creating a friend. You're not creating someone who's rooting for you. You're
right.
not creating anything that's going to outlast that one deal. Real estate is relationship driven.
And how do you think brokerage prepares somebody to be a successful real estate entrepreneur?
So I think it's every real estate focused minded person should start off as a salesperson
Mm,
and a broker. Like anything else, real estate is a product.
mm,
And if you don't know your product, you're not going to be successful.
mm,
So, the same way person that makes this table has to understand how wide, how thick, what material, where to import the material.
mm.
It's the same way with real estate. You have to understand your neighborhoods, you have to understand the zoning. If you're going to reach out to an investor and you're going to pitch him on buying a property, he doesn't care that you're doing that because you want to make a commission.
Right.
He only cares about what that property is going to do to his
Right.
portfolio and whether or not it's going to help him. So you have to know the product
Mm,
in order to understand how to help him and how to help his goals and his ambitions.
mm.
So what better way to know a product than to actually understand how to sell it?
And so you seem very passionate about brokerage and this whole business. Why did you decide to make a transition out of brokerage?
Well, that's a very easy question to answer. So Johnny, I would make deals. I would sometimes have two, three contracts signing in a month,
Uh-huh.
and it would be the same thing on every deal. I would pitch these investors to buy the property, and maybe the commission was $12,000, and I think I got half. So I would go to the closing, and I would figure my commission is 6,000. But little did I know, they take me to the side. They start arguing over the oil in the tank.
Uh-huh.
They beat me up on the side, and I walked out with less commission.
Uh-huh.
And after a while, you realize, I think I'd like to be on the other side of the table.
Got it.
So I watched what they did. I observed what they did. I realized it's not a big deal.
Mm,
And they were flipping properties. They weren't even closing on them. They would literally, I would buy properties. I would finesse it in a setup
mm,
right after the contract signed, put it back in the New York Times, and sell it 2, 3 weeks later. And then when I went to a closing, it was me, it was my new buyer, and it was the seller. And
mhm.
I didn't even have to close. So again, it's a lot better to make 50,000 or 100,000 than walk away, and get it beaten up. At one point, I would try to stay in the bathroom most of the closing so they wouldn't beat me up, but they usually beat you up anyway. Which, by the way, is a lesson learned. Bro, you should not beat up brokers. You should be happy for them. You
100%. Be
should be
grateful for
happy
them
for them.
for sure. And let's say somebody right now is a broker watching this who's 5 to 10 years in their business and they want to make the transition like you did. How would you recommend for them to go about this?
I think that in the 5 or 10 years that they're brokering, they have relationships, they have people that have made money off of them. And I think that, again, one of the smartest business advice I can give on this podcast is to surround yourself with good people. If you're going to sell and broker real estate to investors, try to find an investment group that actually cares about you,
Mm,
because of that relationship, they can be your partner when you find the next deal. In real estate, it's not about the client, it's
mm,
about the product. It's always going to be whoever has the product is really the priority person in the transaction.
got it.
So if you have a great product and you have clients that you trust, that you've built up a relationship with, why not go to them and say, I want to be part of this deal?
Mm.
Help me be part of this deal. And we'll do a lot more deals together. That will work 99% of the time if you're following and you're working and you're engrossed with quality type of investors,
And you mentioned earlier that you bought your first building at 21.
maybe even younger.
Can you tell us about the first deal that you ever transacted on and how did you put it together?
I will. I will. I had a 14 building package that it was a complicated deal in Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. I thought I was going to put the deal together, resell it. The market crashed at that time. It was the first time that I had to actually close on properties, meaning own them. Uh, I knew nothing about management. I think the first day I owned it, somebody called me that worked in one of the buildings and said, "AB, we need coal." I said, "Okay, great. So go to the store, give me the
Hmm.
bill."
Hmm.
No, no, we need coal. I literally didn't know how a building was heated. I had no idea how a building produced electricity.
Mm,
I had no idea what a main was. I had no idea what anything was. All I knew was numbers at that point. And that 14 building package taught me how to manage real estate.
mm.
So in reality, it was a tough deal, but it was probably the most important deal because it allowed me to understand management.
Would you say that the most difficult parts of your career, the times where you had to think outside of the box to put deals together, were kind of the most progressive times in your career where you kind of learned and developed yourself as an individual?
Hardest part of my career was early on.
Mm,
It was early on when I was trying to just make my first deal, and I was very depressed that it
mm,
didn't happen. Those feelings you never forget those feelings because you literally feel like you're in the middle of no man's land.
mm,
And then when I took over this 14 building package, the neighborhood went to hell.
mm,
There were Korean vegetable stores, there were Israeli discount stores, there were real stores and real mercantile merchants. But in that point in the late 80s and early 90s, it was the tremendous amount of drugs came into these neighborhoods. So I found myself walking the streets of these Crown Heights buildings in a very dangerous manner. I literally lived at home and my mother said goodbye to me. And little did she know I had two bodyguards
oh
that
wow.
literally had to be with me in order for me to collect any of the rent.
Oh wow.
No question, that was the hardest part of my career. I really didn't know if I was going to make it. It was a tough time, tough neighborhoods, but thank God, God's help, I survived.
And as far as your like investment philosophy, like the way you approach investing, how do you think that changed over time since when you were younger?
I mean, I think it's always been the same. I worry very much about the upside. If something makes sense, if the downside is covered, then I just work my butt off to make the most money I can.
Mm.
I think it's a risk reward type of relationship. I want to cover my downside. Once you cover your downside, you can work hard on creating magic. The market goes up, great. But I try to not be one deal away from oblivion.
And let's say somebody watching this is 18, 19, 20, and they want to get into the business of raising capital. How would you recommend for them to do that with no track record?
That's a great question. Johnny, that's the toughest question you gave me today because if an 18-year-old came over to me and asked for capital,
Right.
I would look at the deal and I would see that it made sense. But there's nothing like a person that has skin in the game. When they have skin in the game and they're coming to you to partner up or to do a JV, it's a different story. If they're just coming and they're pitching, you have to have your eyes wide open.
Mm.
Um, but it doesn't mean that they shouldn't pitch, and it doesn't mean that they shouldn't. I think they should embrace the deal and ask, "Can we look at this together? Can we analyze it together?" If they're going to come and they're going to explain to me why it's a great deal when they have no track record and they have no history
Right.
and they have no scars in their career, it's going to be pretty hard to pay attention. But there's a way to they could approach it in a call it a more refined manner. I would say they should come to you and say, listen, I have an interesting deal,
Mm.
might be for you. I'm not an expert, but you are. Let's go over it together. And I would approach it that way. The 18-year-olds that think they know everything are the ones that you got to be careful from. I've never brought an investor in any of my deals where I didn't have a lot of skin in the game. Um, and I think that's very important for people who are trying to syndicate, trying to bring in outside investors. You got to show them the best way to show them that you like the deal is to show them that you're part of the deal.
And can you tell us about your company?
My company's called the ABCO organization. We have different aspects of it. We have a construction division, we have a management investment division, we have a consulting division. We manage all of our own real estate. We do all of our own construction. We do all of our own development. We have a legal department
Mm.
where we know how to handle the legal aspect of the transactions as well as the leasing and so forth. As far as where I want to be in 10 years, if I told you that I want to slow down, it would be true, but I don't know if it would be actual reality because
Okay.
I've been saying this. I said this when I was 40. I'm now 54 years old.
Right.
I don't know if there's any slowing down in this business. I think it's a type of business where it's hard to.
Lifelong journey.
It's a lifelong journey. That's true.
What do you look for a new hire for your company?
I think that I like to hire people who believe in themselves, excited about what they want to do. And I think when someone comes into the door and says they want to work at the ABCO organization, I think it's important when you interview them, when you meet them, I think you need to ask yourself, can you see that person here in 5 or 10 years?
Mm.
If they're just kind of flowing through their career, then it's not going to work.
Mm.
They have to want to see themselves in the company in 5 years or in 10 years. And I think then it's kind of a working formula for it to work. And they definitely have to have confidence in themselves and be willing to learn. And they definitely got to be willing to handle constructive criticism. Because if I'm surrounding around people, I want them to be better, to
Mm.
learn better. I always tell them, you have more in you. Let's get it out.
How did you kind of learn the skills associated with being a leader? Is this something you were kind of born with, or did you develop this as you went through your career?
I think it's something I developed
Mm.
as I went through my career. When you're surrounded by people that rely on you, um, they need to see that you're in the trenches with them.
Mm.
I think if you ask me what leadership a leader needs in order for other people to follow, I don't think it's the door closed, and I don't think it's them 3, 4, 5 steps higher than everybody else.
Mm.
The thing about me is I'm involved in every aspect of the company, from the accounting to the checklists of my developments. I go into a project that's almost done, and I have a door stopper meeting, and they're like blown away. I don't understand. Betesh is here, and I'm telling them how I like my door stops. And I'm telling them that when you put the toilet paper holder,
Uh-huh.
you don't put it behind the person because no one wants to bend their elbow back
Right.
to use the toilet paper. It should be comfortable. Everything should be perfect. Don't put the door stoppers where the door opens up less than 90 degrees. And I think this attention to detail, they see me in the trenches.
Got
I
it.
think you gain respect by being a leader that's in the trenches. If you're in the trenches, they'll follow you right in there. If you don't jump in there, if you don't lead the group in there, I don't think you're going to gain their respect. And if you
Mm,
don't gain their respect, I don't think they're going to follow you in
mm.
the correct way.
Got it. Okay. So you think as a leader, it's important to kind of put your ego aside and remember that you're on the same team as everyone that you hired. And
Without a doubt.
got it.
Without a doubt. I think everybody needs to know that you're there. You want them to succeed. You
Got
want
it.
them to grow. I tell people all the time. I said, you don't have to stay here. It would make me very happy to hear that your career goes up the ladder. And if that's because you spent a few years at the company, then that's great. I'm proud of you.
Mm.
I'm here for you. I'm not here to use and abuse. I'm here to make you reach higher goals for yourself.
And Abe, you mentioned earlier that it's important to kind of separate work and life, and kind of when you're at work, do work. How do you maintain a work-life balance when you have so much going on during the week?
So I said it's important, but I didn't say I'm not successful in it. So I built my company by working, extending the day.
Okay.
I used to and still do have a time period, let's say between 5 and 6, where I kind of relax, and then I go back to work. I used to go play with my kids, and I used to go right back to the office. If I had a basketball league, I'd go play basketball, run back to the office. I literally, more times than not, have spent 11 p.m., 12 a.m., 1 o'clock in the morning. And that used to be my hours.
Mm,
I believe I built my business between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. And I'm not saying it's healthy. I'm not saying everybody has to do it, but it's a very tough balance when you're at that stage in your career. I don't think it's the greatest thing as far as that type of work hours, but I'm just telling you, that's a very big challenge in how you want to balance
mm.
yourself. I don't think you could build a business and a company by 9 to 5. I
Got
don't
it.
think that happens.
Got it.
If people do it, I give them all the credit. I wasn't able to do it 9 to 5,
So you really have to put that time, that extra credit, that time outside of work in order to move forward and push forward.
without a doubt.
Got it. Okay.
Without a doubt. I think it's a lot harder in the social media world that we're in for young career-minded women and men
Mm,
to have that obsession with their career when there's so much distractions. I think that if you want to be obsessed about building a company, you need to put your phone down and you need to grind it out. You need to spend the time and the energy away from the nonsensical things in your life in order to get there. Because I could tell you there are people who are putting their phone down. They're going to get to that finish line
right.
way before you.
And as far as goal setting, this whole process of goal setting, how do you go about this for yourself and for your company?
Again, I'm in a boxing match every day with my alter ego. I don't want to relax. I want to keep on doing. When something works out, there's always another problem there's no time to celebrate. There's always another deal. There's always another challenge. I'm a developer. No developer will tell you that they sleep great at night. They sign completion guarantees. They personally guarantee. Uh, There's no relaxing. You have to just stay in the fight, keep going. I look at my day not as a work day. I look at my day like I came back from a battle,
Mm,
and every day when I hit the pillow, it's a battle that I got through.
mm,
And that's basically the approach you have to have. I don't want to scare people from not being a developer because, again, it's rewarding. It's a way to add equity onto existing buildings.
right.
But you have to focus and you have to realize you're not going to be, if you want to sleep 9, 10 hours a day, I don't think real estate development is
Not the
for you.
business. Got it.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Absolutely not.
Okay. And I know your father had a dry goods business in Queens. How would you say your kind of family and your upbringing kind of influenced your life and your career?
Without a doubt. I always tell people that I inherited something much more valuable than an inheritance in the form of money or buildings. I inherited my parents' hard work ethic.
Mm,
I saw my father go every single day. There was no sick days. He was literally 6, 7 days a week,
wow.
had to open up the store, ran the store. He bought the merchandise. He cut the boxes. He's made the sales. He paid the bills. I'm not saying he was a one man show, but he was basically a one man show. And I think as a young, I think it's, I think at the age of 12 to 17, I don't think this age group understands how much that they're picking up from their siblings and from their parents. You don't realize that you're learning from your parents until much later in life.
Right.
But my hard work and my drive and the ability to work long hours and the ability to keep extending and keep driving myself, there's no question it came from my parents.
Wow.
And I could tell you that growing up with a lot of wealthy kids, that didn't have this in their life, money goes and money comes. I think if you have your work ethic and you have the drive, you have the determination, that's something that stays with you forever. So that's what my parents gave me. They didn't give me any money. They were very poor. I think that's what drove me. I mean, one of the reasons why I got into real estate was working with my father in high school. I used to see him working his butt off, and I used to see the landlord come in his
Collect the
fancy
rent.
car, and he used to collect the rent, and literally the entire month's savings went to rent.
Right.
And when you see your parents have that type of pressure, especially when he raised the rent, as much as my father's business increased, the extra additional rent took all of that away.
Mm,
So I think at a young age, I said to myself, I really don't want to be that victim. I don't want to be victimized by a landlord. I think the idea of being a landlord was basically breaking through the the hurdles and the obstacles and the enemies that my father fought
mm.
all his life. I think that's what drove me actually to take that salesperson's
Got it.
license, is what I saw my father go through.
I see. I see. So you kind of took it upon yourself to be the one to change the perspective from, the tenant to the landlord and the person who's
Without a
working their
doubt.
life and the person who's
Without a
hiring
doubt. I
people.
didn't want to feel the way my father felt.
Got it.
I wanted to be independent. I wanted to give everybody wants the best for their kids and for their grandkids. I'm really not working today for myself. I'm really working for my grandkids at this point.
Mm.
I think that's the community that I'm in. It's what drives us. You need a universal call it element to drive you. And I think what drives me is I want my grandkids to have a little easier time than I had.
AB, can you tell us about any of the philanthropy work that you do nowadays?
So I think giving back to others is probably my secret weapon for success. I'm a very God fearing person. And I believe that even a good idea that I get, I have to thank God for that idea. And I think that when somebody asks for help or somebody needs a lending hand, it could be advice, it could be accompanying him to a meeting with his bank, it could just be a shoulder to lean on or a forum to be heard. I try to never turn that opportunity away. Many times I was in the middle of litigation or I was in the middle of a real estate dilemma.
Mm,
And I could tell you there have been days that I gave out charity. And by 5 p.m. that day, it was a breakthrough.
mm.
The case got settled. The case was in my favor. I believe that the closest you can get to God is to by helping another person.
Mm.
And I would tell everybody that if you think you're busy, don't ever be busy enough to help somebody else because that is the key. That is the magic weapon.
Mm, got it. And you teach at a high school. Can you tell us a little bit about
Sure.
how important that is?
So as I mentioned before, working at a high school and being thrown into a mix of adults who had kids and had a family of their own and had a responsibility, and you're thrown into these cubicles with with literally people who, if they don't make a deal that month, they're out of the real estate business. It was kind of earth shattering. It was very emotional and it was very hard. I was very depressed during those early times of my career. And I like to give back to the younger generation. So I realized what a better way to give back. I basically offered my time and I teach once a week a real
Amazing.
estate course
Great.
to juniors and seniors at the high school. It's very rewarding. I always wanted to do it. It was on my bucket list. I finally got around to do it. This is my second year, and I'm so happy that I'm doing it.
Amazing. And so can you tell us what you're working on currently and what you're planning to do in the next decade?
Sure. I mean, right now we're building. We had on the retail end, building a very interesting Burlington. We took a negative. Modell's went bankrupt, and during COVID, we had crunch in the warehouse portion of a building. We had Modell's vacant, so we basically shopped the entire space to Burlington, and we're building a 50,000 square foot store right in the heart of Bushwick.
Oh, wow.
Very difficult construction job. Escalators, elevators. I think it's going to be fabulous. I think it's going to be one of their best stores in the tri-state area.
Amazing.
And we're building some residential projects. We're closing up now in Crown Heights, a 48 family building. Um, building something on McDonald Avenue, which no one thought would happen, with the help of city planning. Um, and, and then we have a lot of other things.
Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with the audience?
You asked a lot of good questions. Covered a lot, Johnny. I think the only thing I could, if you asked me how to what a person without money starting out, he sees real estate as something he cannot touch. He sees real estate as something he cannot buy. I think the answer is just get started. Don't worry about 10 or 20 years from now. And don't, you know, see yourself as someone who's going to own and develop, but just get started.
Mm,
Get started and kill the day. Win the day. Win the day, you'll end up winning the week, you'll end up winning the month, and surely you'll see yourself blossom
amazing.
into that person that you want to be.
Great. Amazing. And I have my final question to wrap this up. Um, if you had the ability to go back in time and talk to 24-year-old AB, a couple years in the business, what advice would you give him?
Interesting. I, I don't know what advice I would give him because every mistake that that young Avi made brought me a lot of other, a lot of other positives.
Got it.
Every negative part of what I went through in my life come positives.
Mm,
I think that's something that everybody needs to know is not to put your hand in the sand if things don't go well, don't go your well. You gotta hang in
keep
there.
pushing.
You gotta keep pushing, keep fighting, keep getting to work with that confidence level. And I don't know what I would tell young AB. I think what I would just basically say was maybe I could have been a little more chilled out in my younger age.
Okay.
But again, I was in this boxing match with myself, and there was nothing that was gonna stop me.
Right.
I was obsessed, and if I could calm down a little bit back then, maybe I would have calmed down back
And you're
then.
still obsessed to this day.
Yeah, I think I'm a little less obsessed
Okay.
than I used to be, but who knows? Well, maybe. Again, I think obsession and I think being neurotic and I think being nervous are all great traits
Right.
because I think you need to always protect the downside in every deal that you do.
Mm,
And the upside will always take care of itself.
got it. Okay. AB, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate
Thank you
it.
for
This has
having
been
me.
amazing.
Thank you. Same here, Johnny. Thank
Thank
you.
you.